Hi, I'm Jared Fuller. Welcome to Scratching the Surface. If I were to ask you what the most important design object was, what would you say? The chair, the car, maybe something specific like the iPhone or something typographic like the hashtag? Would you say food? I had not honestly really considered food as something that has been designed, but of course it has. So much of our food production has been industrialized, removing it from the natural sources. When it's on our plates too, there's the arrangement of the food, the plating, the presentation. Then, of course, there's all the rituals around what we eat, where the forks go, what order we eat in, and what surrounds us when we eat. All of this, too, has been designed and ritualized so much that we don't even think about it as something that has been planned, something that is cultural and political. The work of Sonja Stummerer and Martin Hablesreiter, better known as Honey and Bunny, is about making us realize this. It forces us to see food as something designed. Through performances, books, photography, and video, Honey and Bunny operate in a field they call food design, which looks at both our relationship to food, but also food's relationship to culture, to politics, to capitalism, to industrialization, to sustainability, to the environment. For Sonja and Martin, food is a lens through which to look at and question the systems that in many ways define our lives. Trained as architects, studying under Hans Hollein in Vienna, they started career in architectural offices before moving into this more artistic space, focusing on food design. They're the authors of the books Eat Design and Food Design, and they directed the film Food Design, the film. Their work has been covered in the New York Times and the New Yorker, as well as many others, and has been shown in museums all around the world. I wanted to have Sonja and Martin on the show to talk about food. What is food design, but also what can food teach us about design? So in this conversation, we talk about the origins of their interest in food design and how their own interest in food design has evolved. We talk about why we should even think about food as something that has been designed, food as a design artifact, and how their backgrounds in architecture influence all of this work and how we can think about food as an architectural project. If you like the show and what we do here, you can support our work by joining our Substack. We have a monthly newsletter that is free for everybody, as well as a paid tier that gets you a bonus interview each month and helps keep this show free for everybody. I want this show to feel like you are listening to a great conversation in a coffee shop. And so really, for the price of a cup of coffee a month, you can help us do this work and put more of these conversations out into the world. Sonja Stummerer and Martin Hablesreiter, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
And a Happy New Year to all of us.
I was watching a talk that you both gave a couple years ago, and in that talk, you said, we can think that a phone or a car or a chair is the most important design object, but they actually aren't. It's food. Food is the origin of design. Those were your words in this talk, and I want to start there. Why is food the most important design object? And maybe even more foundationally, why should we think of food as something that is designed?
Well, I would say it was rather to explain that we think of food something more natural than it actually is, because in many ways, food is always designed or almost always designed before we eat it. And if we start looking at food as a design object, it gives us much more like freedom or ways of thinking about it, how to design it actually. Because if we always take it as given, we also tend like to accept everything in the way that it is. So if we think of it as something that has been designed by someone, we can also start to think about like to alter it or to change it according to our wishes.
And we think that probably food design is the very origin of any kind of creativity, maybe of culture.
Mm.
Because first of all, you need to feed the person who is doing the paintings on the wall in a cave. And you need to think about how to survive the winter, for example, before you go up to Austria or Germany or Switzerland and start to settle there. Uh, and there are so many questions. And if you look at what we eat, we do not eat any kind of nature anymore, except you go to the forest and you find some wild
Mm.
blueberries or
Mm-hmm.
raspberries.
Mm-hmm.
But that's actually it. I mean, cows or wheat or corn, any kind of plant or animal we eat right now was, let's say, by nature completely different. And human beings started to breed them. And so they designed the food. And then we designed the recipes. We designed
Right.
methods to transport food. We designed methods to preserve it, to eat it in a proper way, etc., etc., etc. And this is really, really important. And on the other hand, you can look at any culture around the planet, everywhere. What people eat is completely related to the local culture. It's related to the gods, if they believe. It's related to, I don't know, the capitalist system, if you
Mm-hmm.
believe. It's related to an industrialized system, if you believe, etc., etc. So
Mm-hmm.
it
Mm-hmm.
shows who you are and how you think.
It shows how a culture works, in fact, because the way that the food system works, so the way that people feed themselves, it's a reflection or a showcase of how a culture works, like socially, economically, culturally, also in terms of religion. So there's a lot of meaning in that also.
Yeah, I want to come back to that idea in a second, but I want to ask you just one more kind of foundational question to define some terms, because you refer to this work as food design. And I'm wondering how you define that term, food design. And this is going to be a little overly reductive. How is food design? Could you just, for listeners, explain how food design is different than something like cooking, or place setting?
It's a
Food
frequent
design is its own thing. Can you kind of talk about how you think about what that means?
It's a quite frequent question, actually, and there's a
Okay.
lot of confusion around it. So I'm happy
Okay,
about it
good.
because we are coming from the design world. So
Right.
for us, it's just we're looking at food as a design object, and I think this is also part of it why we are like why people listen to us or why people are interested in our work, because it's just a rather different way of looking at food than people usually would do. So for us, it's just like anything that you design, it's about an aim that you have, how something should function or look like, or what kind of aesthetics it should have, and then you try to achieve that. And there is no difference between designing a chair or designing a system, designing, I don't know what, everything basically is designed in that sense.
Mm-hmm,
The
mm-hmm.
only difference maybe is that it's not professional in food design. Most of the time, it's not professional
Right.
because it's done by different groups, different, like you have, of course, you have cooks, you have engineers, you have like all different kind of professions that work in food industry,
Yeah.
but usually no designers.
But you did actually a definition of food design when you did your PhD about it.
Yeah, that's very theoretic. It's kind of
This is
like,
the show for theoretical definitions. Like, go for it. We're here for
see if I
it.
can make it in English like that. Um, it's about like food design is all the processes and all the decisions that have to be made in order for a food to be the way or to become it as it is as an object. So that
Mm,
includes
mhm.
like the aesthetics, the material, the way that it has been produced, all the material that has to be used for it. Because if we talk about food, ingredients are the material that you use. So it's
Yeah.
also a question of the resources that you use for that and where the products are coming from. So I would say like, yeah, it's all these decisions, because there are a lot of decisions actually along that process, but most of them are made like unconsciously.
The thing that's interesting about what you're saying that I'm kind of curious to hear more about is that it's all the decisions and Martin, you were starting to say this in your first answer too. It's all the decisions that get the food to us, the production, the agriculture, the growing, the kind of the cultural sensibility of how we consider food, but it's also all the decisions that are made after we get the food and the decisions around the food too, the space where we eat food, the context that we eat, who we eat it with. It seems like your interests, when you're talking about food design, and we keep using this word object, but the object is actually kind of a stand-in for these larger systems on both like the front end and the back end. Does that sound right to you? Do you know what I mean there?
When we started, there was a handful of food designers around the globe,
Yeah.
and everybody was actually smiling about us. So it was something really, really new, and still I'm pretty much irritated about the fact that we as designers, we discuss
Right.
about the millionth chair, about, I don't know, the Coca-Cola logo, about, I don't know what, but we do not discuss what we eat every day. So we allow a handful of globalized companies to feed us, and we
Yeah.
don't even want to know why they design, why they decide, how they decide, etc., etc. And so what we have done then at the beginning was that, okay, if there isn't any definition, we do our own one. And our first definition was that we said, okay, the design of the edible object, just the edible object, like the fish finger or the spaghetti, is food design. And the design of the objects and habits
Yeah.
we use for eating is then eat design.
Mm.
The design of the eating situation
Mhm.
and surroundings and all the atmosphere and all this. Yeah.
And the packaging is something else, for example. And then we have the supermarket and the spaces, etc.,
Right.
etc. So by the end, we have an entire design system which is completely interrelated, and I'm pretty sure that the food is very much related to architecture, for example.
Yeah.
So we have to discuss many issues about that. But what we said at the beginning, and we did then the research about it, or you did it actually, Sonja, who is defining food design how? And then I think we found something like 6 or 7 different definitions about it.
But our first book was more about this idea, why is the food designed in the way it is? And we were talking just about these edible objects. And we came up with 3 main answers. That was like, first, because we want to fulfill some aesthetic or taste experience. So to enhance that experience that we want. So it's an aesthetic value. The second is functional, because we need food also to be functional. We need to keep it for a longer time, for example. We need to make it in a way that we can easily produce it. So all this also affects how the object looks like. And the third one is like all the cultural meanings that are behind. So we also design a lot of very unfunctional food.
Right.
If you think about all these different types of bread, for example. We have, in many cultures, we have specific ways of designing bread, and some of these shapes are really complicated. If you think of the pretzel, for example, pretzel,
Yeah.
like a traditional bread probably coming from northern Italy and was used in religious context, probably also during the what is it called, the mass, the service. That's how we call it, during the service, like the Catholic, not the Catholic at that time, but during the service. And this is also very problematic at the moment now, because you can hardly produce it using machines. So it's very difficult to create. There are machines now to do it, but they're super complicated because it's a form that actually is really, really bad to be in terms of producing. So yeah, so some things are really unfunctional.
Why does food look the way it does? That research to me is much more. I don't want this to sound like a value judgment. It's much more straightforward. Why does food look the way it does? How does it communicate certain things that those concepts you were talking about, fulfilling a need, being functional, aesthetics. I think we can see that in the food objects, or you can make that visible in the food objects. And that's what you did in a lot of your early work. But as you start to think about eat design and these cultural contexts and sustainability and climate and production methods, as you move into these systems, the object is still a piece of that, but it's one piece of this larger system. I'm wondering, how do you can make the aesthetics or the function visible in the food object. How do you make the systems visible in the object? Or how do you think about going from food object to food system? Tell me about that translation that's happened in your work. Do you know, you know what I mean there?
Yeah, I know
Okay.
what you mean. Yeah, well, we've been working in that field for almost 20 years.
Right.
So after a while, we got bored with the first, or 25. Yeah, we got bored with the first questions because
Yeah.
we had like we had them through in a way. So we
Yeah.
come up with more things that are related to food. And during that time, we also shifted the way of how we worked about it, because the first things that we did were books, and then eventually we inserted or photographers for
Yeah.
photographs, because we thought like we need. And then we came to this eating situation, and that's why when we started to do like videos or photos that are showing us in a specific
This is exactly what my next
situation.
question was going to be. Yeah, this
Yeah.
is great.
So we also shifted the medium in a way. So we started to do this kind of tableau work where we have like arranged a very, most of the time, absurd eating
Hmm.
situation in order to show people how like the rules of eating work, because actually we are following very strict rules while
Yeah.
eating. There is
Yeah.
a lot of course, there's cultural difference also, but it's very strict rules. If you in Europe, for example, it's very unpolite to like eat with your fork only. You always have to hold the knife and the fork in your hand while
Right.
eating, even when you're just using the fork. So I know that in US, for example, it's different. That's what they
Yeah.
told me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
even within one almost similar culture, so tiny differences. And the funny thing about it is like people make a lot of fuss about it because they think like, oh, it's uncivilized to do this or that,
Right.
even though it's a very, very tiny variation, in fact. And yeah, that was fascinating to us.
Yeah,
What did I?
and somehow, I mean, at the beginning we were writing about the shapes and about let's say the objects, and then on one hand people started to criticize us to say, okay, how about sustainability?
Mm.
And we were really scared at the beginning. So do we have enough knowledge? How should we integrate sustainability into our work? How can we do this? Uh, it seemed to be really, really difficult. And then other people kind of, yeah, but do this and that. And then people ask, can you perform? Can you do an artistic photograph about that? And I mean, we had in our mind already some ideas. So on one hand, it was always, so from the very beginning, it was really important for us to use humor.
Hmm.
Uh, because humor is, well, we always understood our work a little bit like a comic. So it's like a cartoon.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
to explain within a second what you mean. And I mean, I personally hate exhibitions when I need to read. And
Uh-huh.
I read 2 or 3 books per week, and I love reading, but not in a museum. And I so if I see something, I want to understand it. And then yeah, one came somehow to the next point, but then we did some decisions. Say, okay, but if, what then? And I have to say that at the very beginning, we had no idea what we
Yeah.
have touched. So we had no idea how culturally important food and eating are. We had no idea about sustainability. We had no idea about hunger or dignity or the
Mm.
biosphere or biodiversity, etc., etc. And then, of course, if you do kind of a career, you get invited to conferences, for example, then you meet people. Then somebody says, okay, can I do it at a scientific conference? And then you're listening to
Right.
something you never thought about. And then you're like, okay, but I need to integrate it because it's really important.
Then we started to do these performances, and that's where it's much more easy like to work about whole systems
Hmm.
and also to touch people. It's much more easier because it's so easy actually to get emotional reactions when you're working with food. That's also part of the fascination for me, because it's really a lot of fun, and at the
Yeah.
same time people, they get involved very quickly and sometimes very intensively, mostly positive, but sometimes also like they feel provocated, for example. So it's yeah, it's very easy like to get to people very quickly and very intense. So that's also like, I think that's what part of the work, or why it's so interesting to do that.
Yeah,
Nah.
I wanted to ask about performance because, and as you were just saying, your work has taken the form of many mediums. It started as books and writing and research, and then became photography, and then video and performance. And performance seems really central to what you do now and the output of your work. And I'm curious, kind of what it is about live performance that makes sense for this subject. Is performance somehow a better way to talk about or display these kind of cultural political ideas that an object or a photograph or even a book cannot do? What is it about you being models dressed up, in a context that allows for this more kind of cultural or political or systemic exploration?
We came up with the idea of performances because you can't exhibit food.
Mm.
It's getting rotten immediately. And
Right.
I mean, still, we say that it's absolutely necessary that the MoMA, for example, has to have the fish finger in the design
Yeah.
collection.
Yeah.
And they have to do a food design exhibition because it's so important.
And there's so much design in it.
Yeah, there is so much design in it. And I don't know if Paola is listening to it, but hi. And
She's been on the show, so she might be.
Great.
and but on the other hand, we've learned from the very early performances onwards that food is the most interactive material imaginable.
Mm-hmm.
And it's super emotional. So it's a little bit like music, but I think even better because music has different styles. And then maybe you start dancing, or maybe you're like, wow, oh, I can't hear that.
Mm-hmm.
Food is something which touches everybody. So you do a small arrangement of food. You even use just an apple, and everybody is looking at this apple, and then what can I have it or something? And then if you use food, you can bring people into a better mood. And this is the amazing part of it. And that's within a performance, it's an amazing material, it's an amazing method to present a content. Because and so on one hand, food is super emotional. Secondly, food brings almost everybody into interaction. Thirdly, food and eating is everywhere completely regulated, so it's ruled. And we've learned at the university that we should artistically break the rules by the acceptance of human rights, by the
Yes.
way.
Yeah.
And if you break the rules, you bring people to, I don't know,
To react directly. I think that's what makes it also interesting
Yeah.
for us, or fascinating, not interesting, fascinating, and very also, yeah, exciting at the same way, at the same time also very like exhausting. If you perform like you're in the setting and you have an audience, and of course you try to trigger them and you try to make them feel new things, so you're never 100% sure how will they react.
Yeah.
And then you have to react to their reaction. So it's like it's a kind of performance or a theater play that's completely, or not completely, but mostly improvised.
Yeah.
So you always have to be very concentrated. And so it's, yeah, after performance, always feel really exhausted.
Yes.
Oh, I can't imagine. Yeah. I mean, I think.
But one sentence. If you let people break the rules, and as we've said already, that food and eating is completely ruled everywhere. So
Yeah.
it's how to eat what with whom and how to combine ingredients, etc.,
To
etc.
break
And
those
if you
rules.
break those rules, then people cross the border for you. And if people cross the border together, and even if they don't know each other before, then they create a community. And crossing the border together and creating a community means by the end that people smash hierarchies, for example, and they are open to new contents.
Yes.
And then they are willing to listen to each other, and then they are willing to talk to each other. And this is right now really important that people talk to each other. from person to person.
Mm-hmm.
This is actually one of the main reasons why we do these performances. And then, and this is the final reason for me at least, it's funny because if you do a performance, it's art-wise or design-wise not regulated. So this is a format which is really free, and this gives you
Yeah.
the opportunity to go to an audience which is normally not related to the world of arts. And if you do photography, for example, then you have to accept all these art market rules, blah blah, blah,
Mm-hmm.
which exclude the ordinary people from the street to the art worlds. And that's actually something I do not like to produce.
I think this is sort of unlocking something about your work for me as I've been thinking about you and thinking about this conversation, because I was really interested in your use of humor and the use of the absurd. And in these performances, you have crazy outfits. This, sometimes there's staging and the set is very over the top. And I was really interested in why that tone or why that direction is the best way to communicate these ideas. And I'm struck by that is a form of rule breaking. That's a form of play. You've written a lot about playing with your food and the kind of the moral obligation to play with our food. And in an essay about play, you wrote, while the purpose of the urge to play is primarily to help children to learn, our performances use play as a way of unlearning. Is that kind of how you see humor and the absurd, that is a way also to break these rules, to the performances, the humor, the absurdity, that is a form of playing also, right? Is that kind of how you think about that?
Yeah, it's exactly that way. And I think humor also helps a lot to like break rules, but also to break conventions and to
Mm-hmm.
make people think in new ways or new directions. So it's about unlearning to overthink in the same, how you see this, in the same way.
Yeah.
So I think humor helps playing around, breaking rules, also a little bit of provocation. It helps people to like start to think about things differently, and that's also talk about differently, experience themselves in a different way in the best case. So
And in Vienna, we have a very nice word. It's situation is hopeless, but not serious.
that's a political say.
I love that. I love that. The situation is hopeless but not serious. Is that it?
Yeah.
I love that. I'm going to use
There
that.
was a famous writer who said this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've
It was
never heard that before. I love
World
that.
War I, no?
Yeah, it was around 1900. It was
Yeah.
Karl Kraus. But there is also, I mean, I understand it was a little bit Viennese. So there are elements in our work. And let's say the fin de siècle Jewish humor was really absurd sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And we are big fans of absurd humor. And of course, I mean, when we did, for example, the videos for the Victoria and Albert Museum in
Yeah.
London, we used our humor, and then I was so scared that people think, okay, this is a bad copy of Monty Python.
That was really, really challenging because we love working with humor, but of course humor is very cultural dependent.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we got invited to London to the Victoria and Albert Museum, and obviously British humor is like very famous, and we were really, really like nervous that we would be like not competent, but they couldn't compete with this, but it was fine in the end.
Well, this is like, let's say, a personal experience. So we spent 1 year in Japan. Right after finishing our studies, we went to Tokyo to work in an office for architecture. And I think I did any kind of mistake imaginable in the Japanese culture. So I've learned that absolutely nothing is embarrassing by the end because nothing happened. And on the other hand, the Japanese, they were asking all the time, why do you do this and that? Why do you, I don't know, why do you go to the church? Why do you eat this special kind of bread, which does not look like bread, which actually is not a bread? So what is it?
Why is it
What,
called bread?
why do
Yeah.
you live in old houses in Europe? Because we think that's totally stupid, etc., etc. And I was like, wow, we would never ask these kind of questions. And but on the other hand, it's funny. And using that kind of, I mean, it's a kind of let's say early Hollywood slapstick,
this is why I'm kind of curious about this argument that I've heard you make before about not playing with your food as being immoral, because I think that's doing this idea of playing with your food. And we've talked about this in this conversation. Every culture has a set of rules around how we eat and what we eat, and it's so ritualized more than anything else. And play, like we've said, is this way that we encourage kids to learn, except with food.
Mm.
Food is off limits in regards to playing. And you've made this case that, you know, that maybe it is immoral to not play with our food. Tell me about that. How does that relate to this idea of slapstick, of humor, of the absurdity? What does what does playing with our food give us? And B, why should we maybe encourage our kids to play with their food, or why should we encourage that playfulness in a way that we don't now?
Of course, this statement is ironic too. So I have to add that. But yeah, it's interesting that you are allowed to play around, but not with food. So for some reason, food has a specific status, a cultural status that is kind of above everything else, almost like God. So I think that was kind of interesting. So the first thing that you're interested, you know, like a kid, if you say you're not allowed to do that, the first thing you really want to do.
Right.
I think that if kids, for example, if they play with something, it means that they really accept it. They really admire using it. So they create a kind of a friendship with an object. And this is something we should rethink. I mean, I know that the word "don't play with your food" comes out of times which were harder than today. So people were suffering hunger. And of course, it was any kind of food was really, really valuable for the people. So they tried to keep it, and they really tried to say, okay, we need to use everything.
Mm-hmm.
But by the way, the industries around the globe, they play a lot with food, and we as Westernized cultures, we throw away tons and tons and tons of food every day. So the word, so I think we should play much more with our food to create a relationship with it.
But I think the idea was like to do it in our minds as well, not like to play on the plate with your food. The idea was like should be like in the way we think about it, no?
Right. Yeah. But I think, I mean, either way, honestly, is this idea of forging some sort of new relationship, whether that is just thinking about it in a new way, like your performances do, or, and I'm not, I want to be clear, I'm not advocating that we should be throwing food away or wasting food or playing with it, but I think that that resonates with me, that creates some sort of new bond. I'm curious though, how do you think about your work not ending at playfulness, not ending at humor or absurdity, but that there is some bigger idea that is being communicated, you know, that this is actually about, yes, it's funny. Yes, it's like, oh, I'm laughing at this, but also it's making me think about sustainability. It's making me think about waste. It's making me think about production. How do you think about that bridge between the absurd, the playful, the humor, and these really big systemic kind of serious issues? Do you want, how do you want your audience to kind of make that connection? How do you make that connection? Is that a connection that you want people to get right away? How do you kind of think through that?
I think this is our main goal. That's like the vision we have, like to connect playfulness and humor with really serious topics that are obviously food and food systems are now in a state that we have really big problems and we really need to change a lot about it. So how can we make people do that? And we know that by telling them, it doesn't work at all, because it's nothing that works through our brains. It works through our emotion and our hearts. So basically, it's not where, I mean, we know it from all the things that we shouldn't eat because they're not healthy. And we know it, but we still do it.
Right.
So it doesn't work. So we thought about how can we do it in a different way? So we're trying to connect these positive emotions like humor and playfulness with also like these hard or difficult topics of changing what you eat, for example, by telling people, why is it so strict that you have to combine A with B? Why do you always have to have a hamburger with a I don't know, with this type of bread and this type of meat, and you can easily playfully do it in a different way, and you can fill like fresh leaves in between your hamburger bun. That would be a nice hamburger as well. And people think it's funny, but at the same time, like it's maybe not so funny when they think about it twice. So I think the hardest thing, or really the challenge that we like about our work, and the challenge that we're looking for, is like to combine it in a way that is always an equilibrium between positive and negative. So that's sometimes difficult, but we also try to involve like emotions like how is it, like all your body and the way that our body is sustained by the food that we eat, but at the same time the wrong food can harm the body and we can die. So it's very substantial the way that we can perform about food, because it's actually about life and death. So we also try to involve this in an emotion, or to integrate that in an emotional way of doing it. And people, that's something I found really interesting. You can do that by creating atmospheres, for example, or by using specific costumes or colors or lights. And that's what actually the whole design thing is about, these performances, that you evoke associations that people know from different things. For example, sometimes, or for example, in performance, you can use something that usually people would use during a funeral, but you just take like one piece of that. Like, for example, we've been using a lot of soil, like fresh soil.
Yeah.
That's a very intense, how I say this, it gives a very intense atmosphere because it has this specific smell.
Right.
It's very dark color. And if you combine that, for example, with fresh food, it's already quite a strong message, because it's soil, it's where food comes from, but at the same time, it's where you bury your dead bodies. So, you know what I mean? So it's equilibrium between positive and negative. And I think that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, if you look at comedy, for example, I mean, a very good comedy is like you make, as a comedian, you make people laugh for half an hour, and then you come in with very brutal stuff, and you confront them for 10 minutes with the darkness, in a way, with the truth. Or you read a novel, and you read a novel about, I don't know, a mass murderer, and on the same way you understand that it could be a very good person with his kids, and you then, I mean, this is what for me is the Dostoevsky effect. So you always understand, let's say, the very different levels of a person and of social life, and this is really, really important, I think. And I mean, we cannot force as two designers our audience to change their lifestyles, but we create a community. And for my opinion, whatever we do is based on culture. So it's not an instinct or something, it's just culture. And culture is always human-made, and culture is always a social phenomenon. So you do not do culture by your own.
Right.
And we can create groups, and we can place contents or dialogues or debates into groups. And this is really, really important. And for us as designers, I think we need to discuss what are our goals as designers, because I think still the main goal for an educated designer is to make money for a company, or to let a company make money because of your work. And maybe we can think about completely different goals.
Additional goals, at least.
And I mean, we are very powerful people, because what we create are narratives, and people are completely addicted to narratives. So we always want to hear the story, and that's actually what we as designers do. And secondly, we create aesthetics, and aesthetics play a gigantic role actually in our society, because they are foundation of culture. And if we change it, and if we say, for example, that industrial aesthetics are completely yesterdays, completely gone, so we don't like them anymore, and we do not like, I don't know,
standardized products,
Ferraris. I don't know what
Also, we have a lot of rectangular food because of industrialization.
Right, right.
We
can
really
really
like
miss-
it actually, but we are used to it because food usually is not rectangular. Most of food is not rectangular.
So maybe this is a way to ask. You mentioned earlier your background's in architecture. You studied architecture. You studied in Vienna. You studied under Hans Hollein for a while. You worked in architecture for 10 years. What is the significance of that background? What does it mean to be architects who are doing food design? Is there any relationship there, or is there anything from that architecture education or work that you think influences how you approach the work you're doing now?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, Hans Hollein was a very postmodern architect, so I think there's a lot of postmodern ideas in our work still.
He also wrote Everything is Architecture. So I guess,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
maybe the question is food architecture
yeah,
also,
sure.
which is yes.
That certainly influenced us because he also, yeah, he said everything is architecture. I would say like everything is design. So
Yeah.
food is design. And he had this really famous exhibition in New York, I think was that, in the 60s.
Yeah, the
That was
men's
for
trend.
Man Transforms.
Mm-hmm.
There's a book about it. And I think that was really a big of influence to our work because that's a way of how you look at the world, that the world is man-made and that there is a lot of possibilities how you can do it. So you actually, he says, like, people are really powerful because they can decide how
Right.
they design their, not their life, everything actually. So I think this was very inspiring for us.
And he influenced us a lot because he really wanted us to do research all the time.
Mm.
So to collect knowledge, to create something
Yeah.
new out of it. And this is for our work, I think this is really, really important. And then he was a guy who tried to get inspired, not by his own discipline, but by I don't know what,
Yeah. Yeah.
sometimes he came to the university and said, did you know that the game Polo was invented in Kashmir? What? What? And why is it important? But he was always interested in, I think, anything culturally.
Yeah.
But what is funny for me is still, I do not understand the postmodern sense of humor. So,
That's
so
is there humor? Yeah. Yeah, not
yes.
for
They
sure.
understood the architecture as humoristic,
Mm-hmm.
and still, it's like this is
Not funny.
not funny. But and I I like the postmodern concepts, the ideas of urbanism, the ideas of restructuring modernism, of bringing in humanism, emotional parts,
Yeah.
blah blah. But humor, and now we are here and we're completely postmodern too, and we use humor. That's
Yeah.
ironic. So,
Yeah, I was gonna say, as you were saying that, I was like, oh, I would not have put your work in that trajectory or in that lineage necessarily, but I think that postmodern sensibility and those ideas are actually really kind of foundational to the work that you do.
yes, they are. They are. So we are pretty much influenced by postmodernist architecture. So we've worked for Isozaki as well.
Right.
We are influenced by Michel Foucault. We
Mm-hmm.
are
Yeah.
by these ideas of analyzing culture from a very, very different perspective. So we try to understand, I don't know, politics through cleaning
Yeah.
or through eating. And this is a very postmodernist, a
Way
very
of thinking.
postmodern way of thinking.
Also this intercultural perspective, I think. This is very important to food or crucial to
Yeah.
food. Or
I'm struck by how you said that Hans was sort of interested in everything, and I'm I'm trying to think if I can form this into a question. I'm still interested in this idea that you are trained as architects and what that means for the work that you're doing now and that relationship. And I'm kind of curious how you think about being architects, being designers, and then interfacing with experts in other fields. Martin, you mentioned at the beginning, like getting invited to different types of academic conferences and feeling that like, oh, we don't know what we're talking about. How does what does it mean for you to be designers who are working with and reading, nutritionists, climate experts, logistics people, production people? How how does architecture design become a way to maybe bring those together in new ways? Or how do you kind of think through your position in these larger kind of multicultural, but also multidisciplinary, multi-industry, multinational conversations and issues?
I think basically it's because of as an architect, you don't have any kind of competence. So
Yeah, the competence of
yeah,
combining things and
yeah,
communication.
you need
Yeah,
to
yeah,
combine different expertises. So you have no clue about how to keep a building stable. You don't know how thick a column should be. So maybe a bit, but I mean, it's there are engineers doing that. You have no
yeah,
idea
yeah,
materials. You have no idea how to form a material, and for everything you have an expert. And I think this idea of uh,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
combining expertise is something which is really, really architecture by the end. And secondly, we plan almost everything. So some for our artistic colleagues, it's like, oh my God, these are so architects. Yeah, it's
I think you can feel it in the spaces that we try to choose for our performances.
mm,
Because
mm-hmm,
for me, the way a performance works, it's very connected to the space that you are, because the light and the atmosphere and the acoustics and of course also colors sometimes, it's very, very important to make the performance work, because that's the
yeah,
emotional impact that it will have in the end. So for me, for example, it's very difficult to do a performance in not interesting space. For example, conference hall. These are conference rooms.
yeah, yeah,
Sometimes
yeah,
I work quite a lot with universities and conferences, research centers. Sometimes we are asked to do performance in the conference hall, like in the conference room itself. And that's really difficult because it has such a strong feeling of conference already. It's very difficult to set up a new or different atmosphere in there. So we always try to like, can't we do it like outdoors? Can't we do it like in the hall outside? So that's really difficult.
But I think it's also a bit like we were discussing a bit earlier that it's not just architecture, it's really Hans Hollein. So he wanted us to collaborate
mm-hmm,
outsiders. He brought people in and said, okay, now we do a concert hall. So this is the guy who has a clue about acoustics. Talk to him about that, and not to me. Uh, and that was actually the system at our university. Say, okay, let's understand architecture as collaboration. But I don't know if every architect around the
right.
planet is like us. And yes, I mean, we try to understand spaces, we try to understand systems. And I think also our interest, almost a fetish in sorting, is a little bit architectural based. So it's like, okay, now we sort by color, we do this,
Uh-huh, yeah, yeah.
we use shapes, and then we create arrangements out of that. I think this is very architectural.
We mentioned earlier that when you started doing this, there were like not many food designers. Food design was not maybe clearly understandable discipline in a way that maybe it's a little bit better now. I'm also thinking about how our relationship to food has changed over the course of your career. Kind of increase in access in parts of the world. I'm thinking specifically in my context in the United States. food has always been political, but it's increasingly politicized. Just in the last month, our health secretary released a new food pyramid of, what, nutrition and what we should be eating. There was that kind of strange thing a couple years ago here where um, kind of culture wars about whether you should be eating burgers and we're going to, the government's going to take your burgers away or something. And I'm wondering if like, how does this sort of increased politicization of food, this kind of consciousness around the world about what food means and represents, has that caused you or forced you to change how you approach this work, or has that seeped into the work in any direct way?
I think food has always been subject to propaganda.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of examples from the Nazi period,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but I'm sure that has been done also in like ancient Rome and
Yeah.
wherever it was. So I think it's just because it's so easy to, or if you think of religion, also food rules are very
Oh
like,
yeah. That's
so because
true.
it's such an everyday object and it's so easy to reach people with your message if you attach it to food. So I think that's not really new. What is new maybe is like that food has become such a topic that is so much talked about. So
Yeah.
all the social media things and all the food shows and cooking shows, and I think it's much more, it's such a topic that is so like, I think nobody was talking so much. Yeah, we didn't talk so much about it, but I still think that people don't cook more because I think it's rather the other way around.
I
The
think
less
that's
we
what I
cook,
was
the more we talk about it.
I think that's what I was getting at is
Yeah.
maybe not so much that the politicization is new, but the fact that food as a form of identity creation seems much more front of mind in a way. The fact, we're watching these cooking shows, we're seeing the stuff on Instagram, like what we eat, it is a way to define ourselves in a much more explicit way than I think
Mm.
it has been before, which I think is interesting.
And we talk about it all the time.
Yeah,
So we
yeah.
express it also.
But
Yeah, it's true.
I think historically we are just looking at it as a westernized, industrialized culture right now. So,
Mm.
and if you look at Japan, for example, I mean, they talk about food all the day. Also the Italians.
The
I mean,
Italians,
the
yeah.
Italians just talk about food and sex. And the industrialized nations, I think, had a kind of a break of talking about food because for a longer period of time, our culture thought that the industries will solve all the problems.
Hmm.
And also the food problem was somehow, I mean, everything was just like industrial. And it was innovation, it was good, it was cheap, it was and then I mean, look at the 90s or early 2000s. So the early Silicon Valley scene was dreaming about nutrition pills, blah blah blah,
Yeah,
but not
yeah.
eating anymore. And now it comes completely back. And I think that's on one hand very normal that we talk about food all the day because it's very cultural, as we've said, and it's very emotional. And it shows who we are, etc., etc. So it's something really, really important for us. And this is from a today's perspective, what is interesting for me is that, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, it was like you as a liberal person had to try everything. We had to be very, very open-minded food-wise. And now it's vice versa. Now the liberal persons do not eat anything anymore. So they are vegan or they are this or that, blah, blah, blah. So we created very, very strict rules and we define ourselves now by a kind of
Restricting ourselves.
restricting, or I can also say ignorance in a way. So it's I don't like the idea of this super personalization of our society.
That's just a new set of rules, a new set of rituals, that we've been talking about. That's interesting. Yeah.
And another very interesting point is let's say the design markets recognized the man as a customer for the kitchens. And so I've experienced, and now I'm 52. And when I was a student, and I love cooking, but when I did my cooking as a student, everybody was like, you are a man, come on. And now every man, at least let's say the green left liberal bubbles, the man is cooking with the red French pots and the Japanese knives, and I have everything.
Me too.
So it became a design market.
Yeah.
And on one hand, it's interesting. So, and it's always the same thing, you know, as long as an issue, as long as a topic is considered female, then it's like second class. It's come on. Should we talk? We have to talk about important things, yeah, football, for example, or basketball, or whatever, but not about cleaning. But once, if cleaning becomes, let's say, a male fetish, we will see that men are talking a lot about cleaning, and then it's a public issue.
Right.
But I think the media hype about food is over the top now. I think it's like decreasing again.
But I think this is like a nice way to wrap up this conversation, because I think this is, in a lot of ways, is what your work is doing. It's trying to make us aware of these things and question why we think the way we do, or react the way we do, or act the way we do when we're around food. Whether that's the gendered element, the politicization, the culture, the discourse, this humor and absurdity that we were talking about, these performances that you're doing are a way to kind of shock that a little bit and say, like, wait a minute, why is it this way? Why is this? And I think, especially in these last couple of minutes, what I'm kind of hearing you say is that we're kind of just like, replacing these rules with new rules. We're replacing these rituals with new rituals, and it's just kind of the cycle. I think that's actually the through line in your work in some way. I have one more question to wrap up. I've heard you say in other interviews and presentations that you give that the most important question that we ask ourselves every day is what do I eat today? And that is a personal question. That's a question to sustain us, but that's also a question that has influence around the world, how we answer that question. And so I have a two-part question. One, what have you eaten today? And two, how has asking yourself that question, how has doing this work, how has that changed your own relationship to food and to what you eat? Have all of this stuff that we've talked about, has that had any influence on your own kind of personal relationships to food and eating?
So first question, I've had a pasta with zucchini today, and some
me
extra.
That sounds good.
Oh yeah, I don't know in English. Okay, there are some other things and I don't know in English.
Yeah, pine tree
seeds.
Pine tree
How you
seeds.
call and rosemary and stuff like that.
And brie.
And cheese. Second question.
This is good. That's good food. That was a good answer.
Second question was how we changed. Actually, we really love cooking, so we still cook, maybe new recipes sometimes, but it's more maybe connected to our travels than to our work, but it's connected in a way. But I have to say I'm much more aware of ingredients in terms of that I look much closer to the small writings on food packages now. I haven't been doing that like 10 years ago, maybe. Now I know that the less ingredients on the package, the better the food is.
Yeah.
So things like that, I'm more aware now. It's more about ingredients and shopping, I would say, than about eating itself.
Yeah, and we think a lot about food waste. So we try to reduce food waste as much as possible. So we if we buy chicken, for example, we really buy the entire chicken, and then we really work with any kind of part. Also with skins, sometimes stuff like that. So it changed our habits a bit, but for me, it's really important to say that at least I separate my professional life from my private life. So I'm not a missioner. I do not talk to my friends about sustainability. So
Right.
then we talk about football or something else, about politics. And that also means, I mean, we do not do every day an eat out performance at our lunch table. Yeah, it's
Right.
we are quite ordinary people. I mean, yes, some parts changed, but I mean, we are living in Vienna, and this is in a way a paradise. I mean, the next farmers market is 500 meters away, and I love cooking, so we really try to avoid going to the supermarket.
Yeah.
And it works. And it's cheaper, it's better, the quality is amazing. So it's you do local seasonal products. And yes, I mean, I do not eat processed food.
Almost not, you have to be honest.
If possible, if possible, yes.
You love sausages, for example.
Yeah, and I love beer.
You love beer. Okay. Okay. Getting very personal now.
I love beer. That's a great way to end this conversation. I think your work is really important in a couple ways. I think it does I think, as we've talked about in this episode, I think it's makes us aware of the ritual, the culture, the ideas around what we eat, and make us think about it in a different way. But I also think it makes us think about design in a different way, and what design can do, and how we relate to design, and how design kind of interfaces with these larger kind of systemic questions. I think your work really kind of clarified that for me. And so I really appreciate this conversation and everything we talked about. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
A great pleasure.
That was my conversation with Honey and Bunny, better known as Sonja Stummerer and Martin Hablesreiter. Our theme music is by Jeremiah Chu. The show is funded thanks to the generosity of listeners like you. If you like what we're doing, I hope you consider supporting us and get some bonus content each month. You can follow us across social media at Surface Podcast, and you can listen to all of our previous episodes wherever you get your podcasts and at our website, scratchingthesurface.fm. Thanks for listening.